I've always believed that love, at its core, is a quiet agreement, a silent pact to hold each other's vulnerabilities like fragile glass. For 20 years, Clara and I honored that pact. We built a life in our modest Portland home, a craftsman with creaky floors and a garden she tended with a fervor I never quite understood but adored. Our daughter, Elise, now 16, filled our days with laughter and the kind of chaos only teenagers bring. I'm an architect, not the flashy kind, but the one who designs community centers and libraries, buildings meant to last. Clara taught art at the local college, her hands always smudged with charcoal or paint, her eyes carrying a spark I thought was eternal. It was late September, the air crisp with the promise of rain, when I first sensed the fracture. Clara had been distant, her smiles fleeting, her touch absent. I chalked it up to stress. Midterms were looming, and her students were demanding. But there was something else, a shadow in her gaze when she thought I wasn't looking. I'd catch her staring at her phone, not scrolling, but reading, her lips parting slightly as if whispering to someone I couldn't see. When I asked, she'd laugh it off, call me her overthinker, and change the subject with a kiss that felt rehearsed. One evening, I came home early from a site visit, my boots still dusted with sawdust. The house was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator. Clara wasn't in the kitchen or the studio where she usually lost herself in her canvases. I climbed the stairs, my heart inexplicably heavy, and found her in our bedroom, sitting cross-legged on the bed, her laptop open. She didn't hear me approach, and for a moment, I watched her, her brow furrowed, her fingers hovering over the keys as if unsure. Then she typed, quickly, and smiled in a way I hadn't seen in months. It wasn't joy, it was secrecy. "Clara?" I said softly. She flinched, slamming the laptop shut, her face a mask of guilt before she recovered with a laugh. "You scared me, David. You're home early." Her voice was too bright, her hands trembling as she tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. I wanted to ask what she was hiding, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I nodded, muttered something about a canceled meeting, and let the moment slip away. That night, as she slept beside me, her breathing steady, I lay awake, replaying that smile, that flinch, that lie. I told myself it was nothing, a student's email, a surprise she was planning. But doubt is a seed, and once planted, it grows. The next week, I started noticing things I'd ignored before. Her phone was never out of reach, its screen always angled away. She'd leave the room to take calls, her voice muffled behind closed doors. Once, I overheard her say, "Not now, I can't," in a tone so intimate it felt like a blade. When I asked who it was, she said it was her colleague, Rachel, planning a department event. But Rachel called the house later that day, asking for Clara, oblivious to any event. The lie was small, but it was enough to make me question everything. I didn't confront her, not yet. I wanted to believe in the woman I'd loved since we were 22, the one who'd cried in my arms when her father passed, who'd danced with me in our kitchen to no music at all. But the evidence was mounting, each piece a brick in a wall between us. I started checking her schedule, noting when she stayed late, when she claimed to be at gallery openings or faculty meetings. I hated myself for it, but I needed to know. And deep down, I already did. The days bled into weeks, and my suspicion became a second skin. I'd always prided myself on being rational. Blueprints don't lie, angles don't betray. But Clara's secrecy was rewriting my reality. I began to study her, not as my wife, but as a puzzle with missing pieces. Her routines had shifted subtly. She'd leave for work earlier, claiming morning classes, but her college schedule, posted online, showed no such sessions. She'd return home flushed, her eyes bright with something I couldn't name, her stories about her day vague and rehearsed. One Saturday, she announced she was meeting a gallery owner downtown to discuss an exhibition. "It's a big opportunity," she said, her smile tight as she grabbed her scarf and keys. Elise was at a friend's house, and I was alone with my thoughts, the house too quiet. I tried to work, sketching plans for a library renovation, but my mind wandered to Clara's absence. On impulse, I opened her laptop, left carelessly on the dining table. We'd never had passwords between us. Trust was our currency. But when I clicked, a login screen glowed back. She'd locked it. My stomach churned. I didn't know her password, but I knew her habits. I tried her birthday, Elisa's, our anniversary, nothing. Then, on a whim, I typed Matisse, her favorite artist. The screen unlocked, and I froze, guilt and dread warring within me. Her email was open, and there, in her inbox, was a message from someone named Julian. No last name, just Julian, with a subject line, "Tonight." My hands shook as I clicked. "Clara, I can't stop thinking about you," it began. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that crushed me. He wrote about a moment they'd shared. A coffee shop, her laughter, the way her hand brushed his. It wasn't explicit, but it was enough. There were others, a thread spanning weeks, each email a betrayal cloaked in affection. He called her my muse, promised her things I hadn't realized she wanted. A life unbound, a passion I thought we shared. I printed the emails, my hands steady despite the storm inside me, and hid them in my desk. I didn't tell her I knew. Instead, I watched. Julian, I learned, was Julian Harper, a guest lecturer at her college, a sculptor whose work Clara had mentioned once, dismissively, as pretentious. I found his profile online. Mid-40s, sharp jawline, eyes that seemed to promise secrets. His art was bold, chaotic, everything I wasn't. I wondered what Clara saw in him, what gap in our life he filled. Was it his confidence, his novelty, or had I failed her in ways I couldn't see? That evening, when she returned, her cheeks pink from the autumn chill, I asked about the gallery. She spun a story about a curator named Marianne. Her voice light, but her eyes avoiding mine. I nodded, smiled, played the part of the trusting husband. But inside, I was unraveling. I started tracking her movements, not with apps or devices that felt too cold, but with old-fashioned attention. I noted her car's mileage, the receipts in her purse, the faint scent of cologne that wasn't mine lingering on her coat. Elise noticed my distraction. "You okay, Dad?" she asked one night, her brow furrowed as we washed dishes. I forced a grin, ruffled her hair, and said I was just tired. But I wasn't tired. I was awake, painfully so, seeing Clara for the first time not as my partner, but as a stranger wearing her face. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I needed more. I needed proof that couldn't be dismissed, a truth she couldn't twist. And so, I waited, my heart a furnace of betrayal and resolve, knowing that whatever came next would change us forever. Living with Clara became an act of performance. Every morning, I'd wake to her humming in the kitchen, pouring coffee into my favorite mug, her movements as familiar as the sunrise. But now, each gesture felt like a lie, a carefully choreographed dance to keep me blind. I played along, kissing her cheek, asking about her day, laughing at her stories about her students' terrible sketches. But my eyes were sharp, catching the way her fingers tightened around her phone, the way she'd pause before answering questions about her plans. I started digging deeper, driven by a need I couldn't name. Julian's emails were a map, but I wanted the terrain itself. I found his studio address online, a loft in the Pearl District, all exposed brick and pretension. One afternoon, when Clara said she was grading papers at the college, I drove there. The building was quiet, its windows reflecting the gray sky. I didn't go inside. I wasn't ready for that. But I sat in my car, watching the door, imagining her slipping through it, her laughter echoing in a space that wasn't ours. Nothing happened that day, but the act of being there, of crossing that line, changed me. I wasn't just David, the architect, the father, the husband. I was a hunter now, tracking a truth that was tearing me apart. Back home, I found Clara's sketchbook, usually private but left open on the couch. The pages were filled with studies of hands. Not mine, I realized, but broader, with veins that spoke of strength. Julian's hands, I was sure. The intimacy of it, her pencil tracing his lines, felt more wounding than any letter. I began to notice how Clara's world had shifted toward him. She'd mention art events I wasn't invited to, her voice casual but her eyes wary. Once, she came home with a new necklace, a thin silver chain with a pendant shaped like a spiral. "A student gift," she said when I asked, but her fingers lingered on it, protective. I searched online and found the same design on Julian's website, listed as a custom piece. The discovery was a quiet violence, reshaping my memories of her touch, her promises. Elise was my anchor, though she didn't know it. We'd spend evenings building models for her science fair project. A miniature bridge, my expertise scaled down to fit her dreams. She'd chatter about school, boys, her plans for college, and I'd listen, clinging to her innocence. But even she sensed the strain. "Mom's been weird," she said once, her voice low. "She's always somewhere else." I nodded, unable to explain, unwilling to taint her view of Clara. Not yet. My colleagues noticed my distraction, too. At work, I'd stare at blueprints, seeing not beams and walls but Clara's face, Julian's shadow. My partner, Greg, clapped me on the shoulder one day, asked if I was okay. I lied, said it was a tough project, but his concern lingered in my mind. I wondered if others saw what I did, the unraveling of a man who'd once believed in permanence. By November, the pretense was suffocating. Clara planned a weekend away, a retreat with her department, she said. I checked the college calendar. No such event existed. I didn't call her out. Instead, I smiled, helped her pack, kissed her goodbye as she drove off, her taillights fading into the dusk. Then I opened my desk drawer, pulled out the printed emails, and read them again, each word a spark in the fire growing inside me. I didn't know what I'd do when she returned, but I knew one thing. I wasn't the man she'd left behind. I was something sharper, something ready to carve truth from deception. Clara's absence that weekend was a void I filled with purpose. The house, usually warm with her presence, felt hollow, its silence amplifying my thoughts. Elise was at a sleepover, leaving me alone with my plans. I didn't sleep much. How could I, knowing Clara was likely with Julian, their laughter mocking the life we built? Instead, I turned my architect's mind to a different kind of design. A blueprint for revelation, for justice. I started by gathering evidence, methodical as if drafting a building's foundation. I drove to Julian's studio again, this time at night. The lights were on, and through the window I saw movement. Two figures, one unmistakably Clara, her hair catching the glow. They were talking, close, her hand on his arm. I didn't need to see more. I took photos with my phone, the timestamp a cold fact in my arsenal. Back home, I cross-referenced her receipts, her calendar, the mileage on her car. The numbers told a story her words never would. But evidence wasn't enough. I needed to understand why. I went through her things, a violation that felt justified by her betrayal. In her studio, tucked inside a sketchbook, I found a letter, handwritten, unsent. It was to Julian, her words raw and unguarded. "You make me feel alive again, like I'm more than a wife, a mother, a teacher. With you, I'm free." I read it twice, my chest tight, not with sadness but with rage. Free? From what? From me? From Elise? From the life she'd chosen? I didn't stop there. I logged into her cloud account. Her password, predictably, was still Matisse, and found photos. Not many, but enough. Clara and Julian at a cafe, her head tilted toward him. Another of them in a park, her hand in his. The dates matched her late nights at work. Each image was a brick in the wall of my conviction, but also a wound, proof of how far she drifted. I considered confronting her when she returned, laying out the emails, the photos, the letter, but that felt too simple, too fleeting. She'd cry, apologize, promise to change, and I'd be left with nothing but echoes of her deceit. No, I wanted something lasting, something that would mirror the pain she'd inflicted. I began to think of revenge, not as violence, but as exposure, a dismantling of the life she'd curated with lies. I researched Julian, too. He wasn't just a sculptor. He was a minor celebrity in the art world. His work shown in galleries from Seattle to San Francisco. His charm was his currency, his reputation built on fleeting connections. I found reviews, interviews, even a blog post from a former student hinting at his wandering heart. Clara wasn't his first. She wouldn't be his last. That knowledge didn't soften my anger. It sharpened it. She traded our marriage for a man who saw her as a conquest. By Sunday, when Clara returned, I was ready. Not to act, but to wait. She walked in, her face bright with a glow I now recognized as guilt masquerading as joy. "Missed you," she said, hugging me, her scent unfamiliar, tinged with something sharp and masculine. I hugged her back, my smile a mask, and asked about the retreat. Her story was seamless. Workshops, bonfires, bonding. But her eyes flickered, searching mine for doubt. I gave her none. That night, as she slept, I sat in my office, the printed emails spread before me like a map. I didn't know the shape of my revenge yet, but I knew it would be precise, devastating, a structure built to last. I thought of Elise, of the home we'd made, of the years I'd given Clara, believing in her. And I promised myself that when I struck, it would be with the weight of every truth she'd buried. Clara's return marked a new phase, not of healing, but of calculation. I woke each day with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. My anger no longer a wildfire but a controlled burn, fueling my resolve. I went through the motions of our life. Breakfast with Elise, meetings at work, evenings with Clara's laughter filling the house. But beneath it, I was sketching something darker, a plan to unravel her deception in a way she'd never forget. I started by mapping their world. Julian's studio was their sanctuary, I knew, so I watched it. Not obsessively, but strategically, noting when Clara's car appeared in the lot, when the lights stayed on late. I didn't follow her. That felt too desperate, but I'd drive by after work, my heart steady as I confirmed what I already knew. Once, I saw them leave together, her arm looped through his, her face alive in a way she never was with me anymore. I didn't flinch. I filed it away, another beam in the structure I was building. At home, I played the devoted husband, but I was collecting more than memories. I found a second phone in her studio, hidden in a drawer under tubes of paint. It was a cheap burner, no lock, filled with texts to Julian, brief, intimate, planning their next meeting. "Miss you already," she'd written after one of her late classes. His replies were poetic, manipulative. "You're my light, Clara. Don't let him dim you." Him. Me. I photographed the messages, returned the phone, and said nothing. I began to study Julian's life, too, not just his art but his connections. He had a network, gallery owners, collectors, students who propped up his image. I found their names, their emails, through public records and art forums. I didn't contact them, not yet, but I noted who mattered, who could hurt him most. Clara's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was public, tied to a man who thrived on admiration. I'd used that against them both. Elise remained my blind spot. She was too perceptive, catching my silences, asking why I worked late in my office. I deflected, took her to movies, helped with her homework, anything to shield her from the truth. But Clara's absence was affecting her, too. "Mom's never here," she muttered one night, her voice small. I hugged her, promised things would get better, hating that I couldn't tell her how. Not yet. My plan began to take shape, not as a single act but as a series of moves, each designed to expose and dismantle. I imagined Clara's face when she realized her secrets weren't hers anymore, when Julian's charm couldn't save him. I thought of her necklace, his gift, and how it would look in pieces. I didn't want apologies or reconciliation. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done, to see the life she'd risked crumbling. By December, the holidays looming, Clara was bolder, her lies sloppier. She'd forget to mention meetings, leave her second phone out once, its screen flashing with his name. I didn't touch it again, I had enough. Instead, I prepared quietly, methodically. I backed up my evidence, stored it in a safe deposit box, away from her reach. I drafted letters, not to send but to refine, words that would cut deeper than any shout. And I waited, knowing the moment would come when she'd least expect it, when my revenge would be a mirror to her betrayal, reflecting every choice she'd made. Winter settled over Portland like a shroud, gray skies mirroring the chill in my heart. Clara moved through our home with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, as if her secret life with Julian was a shield I couldn't pierce. But I saw everything: her late-night texts, her distracted glances, the way she'd hum unfamiliar tunes, ones I later traced to Julian's favorite jazz albums online. Her betrayal wasn't just a wound now. It was a rhythm, pulsing through our days, and I matched it with my own. I intensified my efforts, not out of desperation but precision. I rented a small storage unit across town, a concrete box where I kept my growing archive. Printed emails, photos of her car at Julian's studio, screenshots from her burner phone. I didn't trust our home anymore. Her carelessness could lead her to my evidence, and I wasn't ready for her to know. Each visit to the unit felt like laying another brick in a fortress, my resolve hardening with every lock I turned. Clara's lies grew bolder. One evening, she claimed she was attending a colleague's retirement party, but her dress, new, deep emerald, clinging to her in a way that wasn't for me, told a different story. I nodded, wished her fun, and waited until her car disappeared before checking her laptop, left open in her rush. Her calendar had no party listed, but there was an email from Julian. "Meet me at the loft, 8 p.m. We're green." The dress wasn't a coincidence. It was a signal, a private language I wasn't meant to hear. I printed the email, added it to my collection, and felt a strange calm settle over me. Elise was my tether to sanity, though she sensed the fracture widening. Over dinner one night, just the two of us, she pushed her pasta around her plate and asked, "Are you and Mom fighting?" Her eyes, so like Clara's but unguarded, searched mine. I lied, said we were just busy, but the truth gnawed at me. Elise deserved better than a mother who'd traded family for fleeting thrills, better than a father plotting in shadows. I vowed to protect her, even if it meant breaking her world to rebuild it. I started testing Clara, small probes to see how far her deception ran. I'd mention a gallery opening I'd heard about, watching her face for tells. Once, I casually asked about Julian, saying I'd seen his name in an art newsletter. Her smile froze, her fork pausing midair, before she recovered with a dismissive, "Oh, he's just a colleague." But her voice cracked, and I knew she was scrambling. Those moments fueled me, proof her facade wasn't flawless. My plan was evolving, less a single strike than a symphony of consequences. I began contacting Julian's network, not directly but through anonymous accounts I created online. I posted subtle questions on art forums, hinting at his unprofessional conduct without naming Clara. Yet, the responses were cautious but curious, ripples in a pond I'd soon turn turbulent. I wanted his reputation to waver before I acted, his allies to doubt him, so when the truth hit, it would cascade. Christmas approached, and Clara played the devoted wife, decorating the tree with Elise, her laughter bright but hollow. I watched my gifts to her, a scarf, a book, chosen not out of love but strategy to keep her unsuspecting. She gave me a watch, engraved with "Forever, David," and I nearly laughed at the irony. Forever was a promise she'd broken, and soon, she'd see the cost. As we toasted with wine, her hand brushing mine, I smiled, knowing the new year would bring not renewal, but reckoning. January brought rain, relentless and cold, soaking the city and my thoughts. Clara's affair was no longer a suspicion but a fact I carried like a second pulse. I'd become a stranger in my own life, my architect's precision turned inward, drafting a collapse not of buildings but of trust. Every detail I uncovered, every text, every lie, sharpened my focus, and I began to weave a web around her, delicate but unbreakable. I hired a private investigator, a quiet man named Paul with tired eyes and a knack for discretion. I didn't want him to tail Clara, that felt too invasive, too cliché, but to dig into Julian. I gave Paul what I had: Julian's studio address, his public schedule, the names in his network. Within a week, he delivered a file. Julian wasn't just a sculptor. He was a manipulator, charming his way through grants and galleries, leaving a trail of broken partnerships and whispered scandals. There were no lawsuits, no proof, but enough smoke to suggest fire. Paul also found a pattern. Julian targeted women like Clara. Talented, married, yearning for something more. She wasn't special. She was a type. The knowledge didn't soothe me, it enraged me. Clara had fallen for a predator's script, and I'd been blind to her vulnerability. I thanked Paul, paid him in cash, and added his report to my storage unit. But I didn't stop there. I started leaving traces for Clara to find, subtle enough to unsettle her without tipping my hand. I'd move her burner phone an inch from its hiding spot, leave a gallery flyer with Julian's name circled on the counter. Her reactions were telling: wide eyes, a quick flush, excuses tumbling out too fast. She was nervous, and I savored it. Elisa's 16th birthday was a temporary truce. We threw a party, friends and balloons crowding our home, Clara beaming as she cut the cake. I played my part, hugging my daughter, joking with her friends, but my eyes tracked Clara's every move. She was distracted, checking her phone when she thought no one saw. Later, I found a text on her burner. "Wish I could be there, Muse." From Julian, of course. Even on Elisa's day, he was her priority. I photographed it, my jaw tight, and promised myself her selfishness wouldn't touch our daughter. My anonymous online posts were gaining traction. Art blogs began mentioning Julian, not by name but as a certain sculptor whose ethics were questionable. I fed the rumors carefully, using throwaway emails to share vague but damning hints, missed deadlines, favoritism with students. I wasn't ready to name Clara, but I wanted Julian's world to feel the pressure, his confidence to crack. One night, I saw Clara reading an article on her laptop, her face pale. She closed it quickly when I entered, but I'd seen the headline, "Is the art world ignoring its own?" She knew something was stirring, and it scared her. At work, I was slipping. Greg, my partner, pulled me aside, said my designs were off, my focus gone. I apologized, blamed stress, but he wasn't convinced. I didn't care. My real work was at home, in the quiet hours when Clara slept, and I planned. I began drafting a letter, not to her but to her college dean, outlining an anonymous concern about inappropriate faculty conduct. I didn't send it. Timing was everything, but writing it felt like loading a gun. By late January, Clara's behavior shifted. She was jumpy, snapping at Elise over small things, avoiding my gaze. Once, she left her necklace, Julian's gift, on the bathroom counter, and I stared at it, imagining it snapped in two. I didn't touch it, but I knew its days were numbered. She sensed my distance, asked if I was okay, her voice trembling. I smiled, said I was just tired, and watched her relax, believing she was still safe. But she wasn't. The web was tightening, and soon, she'd feel its threads. February's cold was unrelenting, but my purpose burned hotter. Clara's affair had become a parallel life, one she thought she'd hidden perfectly, but every step she took left footprints I followed. I was no longer the man who'd trusted her blindly. I was her shadow, her judge, crafting a reckoning that would leave her exposed. The storage unit held my evidence: emails, photos, texts, Paul's report. But it was my mind where the real plan took shape, each piece slotted into place like a building's frame. Clara's carelessness was my ally now. She'd stopped locking her laptop, perhaps believing I'd never suspect, or maybe she was too consumed by Julian to care. One night, while she showered, I opened it and found a new email thread. Not to Julian but to a friend, Mara, who taught at a rival college. "I'm in too deep," Clara wrote. "He's everything I didn't know I needed, but I'm scared. David's been different." Mara's reply was cautious. "Be careful, Clara. This could ruin you." I printed it, my hand steady, her confession a gift I hadn't expected. She was scared, of me, of consequences, and that fear was my leverage. I decided to push her, to make her feel the walls closing in. I left deliberate clues now, not just for her but for Julian. I mailed an anonymous note to his studio, typed and untraceable. "Your muse isn't yours alone. Eyes are watching." I didn't sign it, didn't need to. I wanted him to squirm, to wonder who knew. Days later, Clara came home rattled, her eyes red, claiming a bad day at work. I asked gently, probing, and she deflected, but her hands shook as she poured wine. The note had reached him, and he'd told her. Good. Elise was struggling, her grades slipping, her usual spark dimmed. She'd overheard Clara arguing on the phone. Not with me, I knew, and it confused her. Why's Mom so mad all the time? She asked, her voice small. I hugged her, promised to fix it, but inside, I raged. Clara's choices were bleeding into Elise's world, and that was unforgivable. I doubled my efforts to shield her, driving her to school, planning weekends away, anything to keep her from the fallout I was engineering. Online, my campaign against Julian was blooming. A gallery in Seattle dropped his upcoming show, citing scheduling conflicts, but I knew better. My anonymous tips had reached the owner, sowing doubt. I posted more, framing Julian as unreliable, a man who used charm to mask incompetence. The art world was small and whispers traveled fast. Clara noticed, too. She mentioned his stress, once, thinking I'd sympathize. I nodded, hiding my satisfaction. His world was fraying, and hers would follow. I began preparing the first phase of my revenge, something public but deniable. I designed a flyer, simple but striking, with a photo of Clara and Julian from her cloud account, the cafe shot, their hands touching. Below it, I wrote, "Art or affair? Ask them." I didn't distribute it. Not yet, but I printed a single copy, held it in my hands, imagining it pinned to her college's bulletin board, her students' whispers trailing her. The thought was intoxicating, but I waited. Timing was everything. Clara's necklace became my fixation, a symbol of her betrayal. One morning, as she dressed, I accidentally knocked it off her nightstand. It fell, the spiral pendant cracking against the floor. Her gasp was sharp, her eyes wide with panic. "David, be careful," she snapped, cradling it like a relic. I apologized, my voice soft, but inside, I celebrated. That crack was a promise of what I'd do to her world, to Julian's, to the lie they'd built. She didn't know it, but the first fracture was mine, and it wouldn't be the last. March arrived, raw and restless, the city waking from winter's grip. Clara's affair was a wound I'd stopped trying to heal, instead using it to fuel my design. A revenge so precise it would feel like fate. I'd spent months gathering, watching, planning, and now the pieces were aligned, a structure ready to rise. Clara and Julian thought they were untouchable, but I was about to prove them wrong. Not with confrontation, but with a trap they'd walk into blindly. I focused on Clara's college first, her sanctuary of lies. Using a burner email, I sent the dean a vague but pointed message, concerned about faculty conduct, personal relationships compromising professionalism. Look into recent guest lecturers. I didn't name Julian or Clara, but the implication was clear. I knew the dean, a stickler for reputation, would investigate quietly. Days later, Clara mentioned a weird meeting about department policies, her tone uneasy. I feigned concern, asked if she was okay, and watched her lie, her fingers twisting that spiral necklace. The seed was planted. Julian was my next target. His reputation was already wobbling. Galleries hesitating, collectors pulling back. Thanks to my online whispers, I escalated, sending an anonymous tip to a local art blog. Sculptor JH using college connections for personal gain. Check his recent collaborations. I included a blurred photo from Clara's cloud, their silhouettes unmistakable to anyone who knew them. The blog posted it, not as fact but as gossip, and the comments exploded. Speculation, accusations, names circling closer to the truth. Clara's face was tight when she read it, her phone buzzing with Julian's texts. I saw them later on her burner. "Who's doing this?" he wrote. She didn't know, but her fear was palpable. Elise remained my priority, her confusion growing. She'd found Clara's necklace, repaired but scarred, and asked why it mattered so much. Clara brushed it off, but Elise wasn't fooled. "You're both acting weird," she told me later, her voice sharp. I took her hiking, just us, the forest a refuge from the storm at home. I promised her honesty soon, but not yet. She didn't need to carry this yet. Her trust kept me grounded, a reminder of what I was fighting for. I refined my flyer, the one with their photo. I added details now, dates, places, pulled from their emails, and printed a dozen copies, storing them in my unit. My plan was to distribute them strategically, her college, his studio, local galleries. Not to destroy them outright, but to force them into the open, to make their secret a spectacle. I imagined Clara's colleagues whispering, Julian's clients retreating, their worlds shrinking under scrutiny. It wasn't enough to hurt them, I wanted them to unravel. Clara's behavior was erratic now, her confidence crumbling. She'd snap at me over nothing, then apologize, her eyes searching mine for suspicion. Once, she left her burner phone unlocked, and I saw a text to Julian. I think David knows something. His reply was cold. Handle it, Clara. I can't lose this. Lose what? Her, his career, his game? I didn't care. Their panic was my victory, proof my moves were working. I bought a small recorder, hidden in a pen, and started carrying it. Not for Clara, but for the moment I'd confront Julian. I wanted his voice, his excuses, preserved for when I needed them. I didn't know when I'd face him, but I was ready, calm, calculated, an architect of their ruin. At night, as Clara slept, I'd sit in my office, the recorder in hand, imagining his shock, her betrayal mirrored back. The trap was set, its jaws hidden in plain sight, and all I had to do was wait for them to step inside. Spring's tentative warmth crept into Portland, but my world was ice, sharp and unyielding. Clara and Julian were fraying, their secret life cracking under pressures they couldn't trace. I'd spent months building this moment, and now, with March's end, I launched my first strike. Not the full blow, but a cut deep enough to bleed them both, to make them feel the weight of what they'd done. I chose Clara's college as my stage. On a Monday, when I knew she'd be teaching, I drove to campus at dawn, before the crowds. The bulletin boards in the art department were public, cluttered with flyers for shows and clubs. I pinned up 3 of my posters, Clara and Julian's cafe photo, the question art or affair? Bold beneath it. I'd blurred their faces slightly, enough to avoid legal trouble, but anyone who knew them would recognize the auburn hair, the sculptor's frame. I added no names, just a website link, fake, untraceable, meant to spark curiosity. By noon, I knew her students would see it, her colleagues would whisper, and Clara would feel the ground shift. I didn't stay to watch. I drove to work, my heart steady, and focused on blueprints, the normalcy a mask. But I checked the art blog I'd tipped, and by afternoon, the flyer was online, shared by a student with the caption, Drama at PSU? Comments piled up, some joking, others indignant, a few naming Clara and Julian outright. The anonymity I'd cultivated was thinning, exactly as I'd planned. They couldn't hide forever. Clara came home late, her face pale, her hands clutching her bag like a lifeline. Rough day, she muttered, avoiding my eyes. I asked, gentle as always, and she spun a story about a grading dispute. But her voice shook, her necklace glinting like a guilty pulse. I knew why. She'd seen the flyer or heard about it. Later, I checked her burner phone, left in her coat pocket. Texts from Julian. What the hell is this? Fix it, Clara. Her reply was frantic. I don't know who did it. I'm trying. Trying what? To lie harder? To save him? I smiled, tucking the phone back, my first strike a clean hit. Elise was at a friend's, spared the tension, but I called her, needing her voice. She sounded tired, said Mom had been super stressed. I promised a weekend trip, just us, and hung up, my resolve ironclad. Clara's betrayal had hurt Elise, even if she didn't know why, and that fueled me more than my own pain. I wanted Clara to lose what she'd taken for granted, her job, her reputation, her ease, not out of spite, but justice. Julian's response came indirectly. Paul, my investigator, called, said Julian had canceled a gallery talk, citing personal issues. I thanked Paul, knowing the flyers had rattled him. I posted another anonymous tip online, this time to a bigger art site. JH's latest muse is a married professor. Check local campuses for proof. I included no photo, just enough to fan the flames. By evening, Twitter was buzzing art insiders trading theories. Julian's name trended briefly, his silence damning. I prepared my next move, refining the recorder's use. I'd confront Julian soon, not to fight but to capture his arrogance. His excuses, for a larger audience. I drafted more flyers, these with sharper words, ready for his studio, his galleries. Clara's necklace haunted me. I wanted it gone, a symbol of her choice shattered. That night, as she slept, I slipped it from her nightstand, held it over the sink, scissors in hand. I didn't cut it, not yet, but I knew I would. The first strike was just the beginning, a tremor before the quake I'd unleash, and they'd feel every aftershock. April's light was soft, but my world was jagged, every edge honed by months of Clara's deception. The flyers had done their work. Her college buzzed with whispers, students eyeing her warily, colleagues exchanging glances. She came home each day drained, her smiles forced, her necklace clutched like a talisman. Julian's name was mud in art circles now, his shows cancelled, his charm failing under scrutiny I'd ceded. But I wasn't done. The first strike was a spark. What came next would be fire. I escalated my campaign with surgical care. Using my anonymous accounts, I sent a package to the college's ethics board. Not to the dean, too obvious, but to a junior member known for ambition. Inside were printed emails, carefully redacted to hide my hand, showing Clara and Julian's plans. Coffee shops, late nights, her words calling him my escape. I included a note. Faculty integrity matters. Investigate quietly. I knew the board would dig, and Clara's tenure, her pride, would tremble. Her reaction came fast. 2 days later, she canceled dinner, claiming a meeting, but I saw her car at a park, Julian's beside it. I didn't approach, just watched, my recorder catching their muffled voices through cracked windows. They're asking questions, she said, her voice breaking. My job, Julian. He snapped back. You said you'd handle it. I drove away, their panic a melody in my mind. That night, I transcribed the recording, every word a nail for their coffin. Elise was my shield and my wound. She'd stopped asking about Clara's mood, retreating into headphones and books, but I saw her pain. Over breakfast, I proposed a summer trip, New York, her dream city. Her eyes lit up, and I promised myself she'd have it, free of Clara's shadow. I began moving money, small amounts, to a separate account, not for greed but for Elise's future. Clara didn't notice. She was too busy scrambling, her burner phone lighting up with Julian's demands. I targeted Julian next, his ego my leverage. I mailed flyers to his top collectors, the ones Paul's report named wealthy, private, allergic to scandal. Each flyer had a new photo, Clara's necklace clear in the frame, their hands linked. Art or betrayal? I wrote, ask JH. I sent one to his landlord, too, hinting at unpaid debts. By week's end, his studio lease was under review, his patrons ghosting him. Online, I posted a final tip. JH's muse is costing him everything. Her name starts with C. The art world ate it up, Clara's initials circling like vultures. Clara's necklace was my fixation now. I kept it since that night, hidden in my desk. One evening, while she was at a seminar, I took it to my workshop, my tools steady. I didn't break it, that was too simple. I melted the pendant, reshaping it into a flat disc, unremarkable, its spiral gone. I planned to return it, a silent message. Her secret was mine to destroy. When she came home, frantic, searching for it, I watched her panic, my face blank, and offered to help look. Her tears were my first real victory. The ethics board was moving, I learned through a colleague's friend. Clara's classes were audited, her emails requested. She didn't tell me, but her late-night pacing, her whispered calls, betrayed her. Julian was unraveling, too. Paul reported he'd left town, on a break. But I knew he was running. My web had caught them, and now I'd tighten it, not to trap but to expose, to make their choices a mirror they couldn't escape. The end was close, and I was ready to draw the final line. The city bloomed with spring, but Clara's world was wilting, and I was the frost. The ethics board's investigation had teeth now. Her colleagues distanced themselves. Her students dropped her classes. Their trust eroded by the flyers and whispers. Julian's absence didn't help. He'd fled to Seattle, Paul confirmed, leaving Clara to face the storm alone. I'd planned for this, her isolation a cornerstone of my design. She thought she could hide, but I'd built a stage for her shame. I moved to the next phase, public and irreversible. I created a website, anonymous, bare, black text, white background, no trace to me. It hosted the evidence. Emails, photos, texts, all stripped of my fingerprints. No names, just the professor and the artist. But the details, her necklace, his studio, left no doubt. I didn't launch it yet. Instead, I sent the link to 3 people. The art blog's editor, a gallery owner who'd cut Julian loose, and Mara, Clara's friend, who'd warned her to stop. I wrote, "Truth deserves light. Share if you agree." I knew they would. By morning, the site was live, shared on Twitter, Reddit, art forums. Portland's art scandal trended, Clara's initials and Julian's name hashed out in threads. I watched from my office, my screen glowing with their exposure. Clara didn't come home that day. She texted about a crisis meeting. But I knew she was reeling. I checked her burner phone, forgotten in her rush. Texts from Mara, furious, calling her reckless. None from Julian, his silence deafening. I smiled, my plan unfolding like a blueprint. Elise sensed the chaos, though I'd shielded her from details. "Mom's freaking out," she said, her voice tight. I took her to a cafe, bought her cocoa, and promised clarity soon. "We'll be okay," I said, meaning it. I'd hired a lawyer, discreet, to draft papers. Not for divorce yet, but for custody, assets, a safety net for Elise. Clara's betrayal wouldn't touch our daughter's future. Not if I could help it. The college acted fast. Clara was suspended, pending review. A letter left on our counter confirmed. She didn't tell me. She hid it in a drawer, but I found it, her shame inked in formal prose. I didn't confront her. I wanted her to stew, to feel the walls she'd built collapsing. Online, Julian's career was ash. His last gallery dropped him, citing reputational risk. My website was a virus now, spreading beyond my control. Their affair a public wound. I returned the necklace, or what was left of it. I slipped the melted disc into her jewelry box. No note, no explanation. She found it that night, her gasp sharp through the bedroom door. "David?" she called, her voice trembling. I feigned sleep, my heart steady. She didn't mention it next day, but her eyes were haunted, searching mine for answers I wouldn't give. The disc was my signature, a promise of more to come. I prepared my final move, not for Clara or Julian but for me, for Elise. I'd confront her soon, not with anger but with truth, laying out her choices, forcing her to face them. Julian was gone, but Clara was here, and her reckoning wasn't over. I walked our garden, her roses untended, and saw my reflection in the window. A man remade, not by love but by justice. The website was my voice, the disc my hand, and what came next would be my heart, cold and unyielding, ready to close this chapter with a cruelty she'd never forget. Clara's suspension broke her facade, her confidence a ghost now, haunting our home. She moved like a stranger, her eyes darting, her hands restless without that necklace to clutch. The website had done its work. Her name was whispered in grocery stores, her face recognized from blurred photos. Julian was a memory, his career shattered, but Clara's fall was mine to finish. I'd waited months, built a fortress of proof, and now, in mid-April, I chose my moment to face her, not to forgive but to reveal. I waited until Elise was at a friend's, the house ours alone. Clara was in her studio, staring at a blank canvas, her hands smudged with charcoal but unmoving. I knocked, my voice calm. "We need to talk." She flinched, her eyes wide, but nodded, following me to the living room. I'd laid out my evidence. Not all, just enough. Printed emails, the cafe photo, A screenshot of her text calling Julian her escape. Her face drained of color, her breath catching as she saw the disc, once her necklace, on the table. David, she started. But I raised a hand, my gaze steady. Don't lie, Clara. Not now. I spoke quietly, each word a stone. I told her I'd known for months, watched her choose him, betray us. I described the flyers, the website, the tips to her college, my voice even no anger, just fact. You thought I wouldn't see, I said. But I did. Everyone does. Her tears came, fast and useless, her apologies a flood I didn't want. Why? I asked, not for answers but to make her say it. She stammered Julian was freedom, a spark, a mistake. She swore it was over, begged for forgiveness, for Elise, for us. I listened, unmoved, her words ash against my resolve. You didn't just choose him, I said. You chose to lie, every day, to me, to our daughter. I showed her the recorder, played her park argument with Julian, his voice dismissing her fears. Her sob was raw, her hands covering her face, but I felt nothing. She'd built this ruin. I'd only exposed it. I didn't mention revenge, didn't need to. The disc, the website, her suspension, they spoke louder than I could. I told her she had a week to tell Elise or I would, my tone final. You won't hide from this, I said. Not anymore. She nodded, broken, promising to try to fix it. I doubted she could. She'd lost the strength I once loved. I left her there, the evidence untouched, and walked to my office, my heart a closed door. Elise deserved truth but not pain. I planned to tell her gently, with Clara, framing it as her mother's failure, not hers. I'd already contacted a counselor, someone to guide Elise through what came next. My lawyer had papers ready, separation, not divorce, to start. I didn't want Clara's life destroyed, just her illusions, her ease. The website was still live, its traffic slowing but its mark permanent. Julian's name was gone from art listings, Clara's from syllabi. My work was nearly done. That night, Clara slept in the guest room, her choice or mine, I didn't care. I sat with the disc, its edges smooth, and felt a strange peace. Not joy, but balance, as if I'd rebuilt something broken. Not our marriage, but my own spine. The confrontation wasn't the end. It was the hinge, swinging open to what I'd do next. For Elise. For me. For the life Clara had tried to erase. I wasn't cruel, I told myself, just honest, and honesty was the sharpest blade of all. Clara's week to tell Elise stretched into days of silence, her courage failing. I watched her unravel, her eyes hollow, her studio abandoned. The website's echo lingered. Strangers emailed me through my anonymous account, some praising the whistleblower, others cursing the scandal. I didn't reply. My voice was in the evidence, not words. Clara's suspension was extended, her career teetering, and I felt no pity, only the weight of what came next. I took Elise to dinner, just us, at her favorite diner. She was quiet, sensing the storm but not its shape. I didn't tell her everything. Clara's job, I said, was to explain. But I promised she'd always have me. Our home, her future. Her nod was small, her trust fragile, and I hated Clara for that most of all. Back home, I gave Clara an ultimatum. Tomorrow or I'd speak. She agreed, her voice a whisper, and I saw fear, not love, in her eyes. The next evening, we sat with Elise, Clara's hands shaking as she spoke. I made a mistake, she began, her voice cracking. She admitted a friendship that went too far, sparing details but not tears. Elise listened, her face stone, then asked, "With who?" Clara hesitated. I didn't. "Julian," I said, my tone flat. Elise's eyes widened. She'd met him, liked his art, and betrayal hit her anew. She left the room, silent, and Clara's sob followed her. I didn't comfort either. They needed to feel this. I moved out the next day, not far, a rental nearby. Not to leave Elise, but to give Clara space to face herself. My lawyer filed for separation, custody split but favoring me. Clara's instability was documented, my stability clear. She didn't fight it, her fight gone. I kept the website live, a reminder to her, though I stopped updating it. Julian surfaced online, a vague post about starting over in Canada, but no one cared. His star had fallen, my hand unseen. Elise struggled, her grades slipping, but the counselor helped, and I was there, every day rebuilding her trust. Clara tried to reconnect, baking Elise's favorite cookies, offering art lessons, but Elise was cold, her forgiveness slow. I didn't push her. She'd heal on her own time. I took her to New York that summer, as promised, and her laughter in Central Park was my reward. Proof I'd protected what mattered. Clara's reckoning was quiet but total. Her college let her go, citing conduct violations. Her name tainted in academic circles. She moved to a small apartment, sold her car to cover rent. Her pride a casualty I'd foreseen. I didn't gloat. I'd wanted consequence, not destruction. But seeing her diminished, clutching that disc I'd returned, was enough. She'd lost her spark, her freedom, the very things she'd chased with Julian. I kept the storage unit, my evidence locked away, not for use but as a reminder of what I'd done. My revenge wasn't cruel in violence, but in truth, exposing her choices to a world she'd courted. I dismantled her lie, piece by piece, and rebuilt my life, Elise's life, without her shadow. The cost was high, our family fractured, Elise's innocence bruised, but I'd paid it willingly, knowing Clara's pain mirrored mine, her fall a blueprint I'd drawn with care. By summer's end, Portland felt new, its streets no longer haunted by Clara's betrayal. I'd moved back to our house with Elise. Clara's absence a space we filled with routine, school, work, quiet evenings of board games and laughter. My revenge was complete, not in fanfare but in silence, its mark permanent. Clara was a ghost now, her life small, her dreams humbled, while I stood taller, an architect of my own future. Elise was healing, her smile returning, though scars lingered. We talked about Clara sometimes, not with anger but clarity. She'd faltered, but she was still her mother. I encouraged visits, short ones, to mend what could be saved. Clara tried, her apologies softer, her disc worn like a penance. I didn't trust her, but I allowed it for Elise, my daughter's heart my compass. Work was my refuge. Greg and I won a contract for a community center, my designs sharper now, infused with a clarity born of pain. Colleagues noticed, called me focused, unaware of the fire that forged me. I didn't speak of Clara, her name was a closed book, her betrayal a lesson I'd learned too well. My storage unit stayed locked, its contents untouched, a vault for a war I'd won. Julian's name faded entirely, his art forgotten, his charm no match for truth. I heard he'd taken a teaching job, small, obscure, a shadow of his past. I didn't care, he was a footnote, his role in my story over. Clara's fall was enough, her mirror to my pain complete. She wrote me once, a letter, asking for forgiveness. I didn't reply, not out of spite, but because I had nothing left to give her. I took Elise hiking, our old trails, and we talked about college, her dreams, her strength. She'd grown, not just taller but wiser. Her mother's mistake a caution, not a chain. I promised her New York again, Paris next, a world she'd conquer. At home, I cleared Clara's studio, not with malice but purpose, turning it into a space for Elise's art, her future. The roses outside bloomed again, tended by my hands, a sign of what endured. Looking back, I saw my revenge not as cruelty but as balance, a scale tipped to right or wrong. I'd lost a wife, a dream, but gained a truth, a daughter's trust, a life remade. The disc, the flyers, the website, they were tools, not weapons, building a justice Clara couldn't deny. I stood in our garden, Elise's laughter inside, and felt no regret, only the weight of a foundation laid strong, unyielding, for us alone. The past was gone, the future ours, and I was ready to design it, line by line, with no shadows left to cast.